Today we are visiting Caerlaverock Castle in southwest Scotland. It's what you can't see here. Well, maybe you can kind of see it. This is a it's a triangular castle. This is the main entrance, main gate. Would have had a drawbridge and the assorted collection of defenses to protect the castle from a frontal attack. Which is really about the only place you could attack from. The other side of the castle was mostly marshy woodland, and then you've got ocean on one on another side and such. So this is where you would attack, going into one of the towers on the castle. The Caerlaverock Castle, as you could said, is a moated triangular castle. It was the stronghold of the Maxwell family for 4 centuries, from the 13th century to the 17th century, so 1200s to 1600s, when it was abandoned. It was besieged by the English during the Scottish Wars. That was the ones with William Wallace, for those who are movie fans. And it underwent demolitions over time, improvements, upgrades to make it more palatial as the centuries went on. And then in 1640, the castle was besieged during the would be the war between the Civil War, the English Civil War, when Cromwell's army, the parliamentarians, defeated the royalists and Charles I, which ended with Charles getting a head shorter than he was initially. It was apparently built initially to control trade in the area. That makes sense. Similar to how monasteries and abbeys and such were built as centers of trade. It's similar for the castle would have had similar purpose. The castle was built Unduin in the 11th century. Caerlaverock, it says here, is of Britannic origin. The first part of the name is the element Caer, meaning an enclosed defensible site. The second part of the name, Lerc, or a lost stream, a name formed from the adjective labar, talkative, suffixed with og, having the quality of. And the present form has been influenced by Scots word leverock, skylark. Ah, interesting. There was previously another castle on the site for a fairly more typical square castle. But our Roman fort on the site. Then British Hill Fort was in use in 950, a while ago. The first castle, actually, the square one, that was built in the early 1200s. Had a moat and bridge facing north, which I'm pretty sure is where the main entrance is. It's through the north. In this area here, these would be the main apartments towards the latter end of the castle's life. As you can see, many stories tall. Would have been very fancy to suit a lord of the castle at that time. But of the original square castle, oh no, sorry, actually that wasn't the wasn't looking at the screen. That was no, actually, that was some of the rooms in the earlier days of the castle. That the very fancy facade we saw just a moment ago. That was the apartments towards the end of the castle's life. We're going to go through those pretty soon. It says here that the early castle may have been incomplete and was abandoned. The new castle, the one we have now, the triangular castle, looking from above the gate into the courtyard, that was finished in the 1270s. So yeah, the early 1200s we had the square castle, which may not have been completed, was abandoned and rebuilt into the triangular castle, looking through or into one of the towers. Would have been the northwest tower. They're empty now. Would have had wooden floors separating the different levels and creating living space in the early days of the castle, probably storage. This here is, we're going to be going into the apartments that were used in the 1600s, towards the end of the castle's life, which would have made the walls not quite as robust as they enlarged them to make them more comfortable, but they had a moat. Not that that would really help much against the an attack. Speaking of which, during the Scottish Wars of Independence in the 1300, give or take, when Edward Longshanks, was trying to conquer Scotland, he did besiege Caerlaverock Castle, and the defenders within held off Edward's army. There was only, I can't remember now if it was 67, I think it said, or 87. No, yeah, 67 defenders inside the castle against the Edward's army, and took quite a while before the people inside surrendered. Only a few of the defenders were injured during the fight. Sadly, after surrendering, several of them were hung as an example, and the rest were allowed to leave. Then with the Civil War, at the end of that, once the castle was overrun, it would have been slighted to ensure that it could not be used again in defense against or for attack again, which is why the south wall, as we could see, was demolished, as was the southeast tower. Not much of that left. Only the south west tower still stands, and that is the castle.